incident was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, Cosmic Family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth!
It's time to go inside the Matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome everybody back to another edition of Inside the Matrix. Our special guest today is Matt Landman. Matt is a filmmaker, activist, entrepreneur from Virginia with a passion for preservation and proliferation of truth. His first passion being sounding the alarm on chemtrails, Matt is most known for his groundbreaking 2017 documentary, Frankenskies. After 5 devoted years of impassioned activism, Matt has hosted over a dozen conferences, spoken on hundreds of radio shows and podcasts, and now has a new passion, exposing and mitigating the dangers of 5G and EMF radiation. With the September 2019 debut of his radiation protection clothing line, Matt strives to bring in hope in a world of increasingly pervasive technology. While Matt leads by example, his primary mission in life is to empower and inspire others so as to honor the truth with integrity and help it live on and flourish forever. You can find Matt on Facebook at Landman808 and also online at actualactivists.com. And you can view the documentary movie Frankenskies at frankenskiesthemovie.com for his film on weather modification. And I highly recommend it. I've seen it myself. It's very well done. And for the EMF protective clothing that Matt has, you can check that out at spiroprotectionclothing.com, and it's spelled SPERO protectionclothing.com. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on and for the lovely introduction.
You're right. You're a busy guy, and I've been, following your work for probably 2 or 3 years or so, and I've seen you testify in front of, I believe they were city councils or county commissioner groups or something like that, and that's something that more of us need to do because, these people are quickly implementing, the UN Agenda 2030, activities on all of us without really knowing what they're doing.
Yes, that's correct. And you're right. I was at both city halls and county board of supervisors. I've spoken at about a dozen counties or cities or towns in California and Arizona regarding the 5G rollout. And it's been a very interesting journey. For me, it started off with, like you said, sounding the alarm on chemtrails. I first woke up to it all as an organic farmer. I try to tell people that I live like a normal life. I'm a normal person. I'm not in any way not like yourself. I don't come from a rich family or anything like that, and I want to encourage people to become activists in that regard because I just woke up to some atrocities. I had lived in Virginia, moved to California, wanted to get into the film industry, went to film school, got a business degree, a master's in business, then finally, and I just wanted to get out of the corporate world, and I worked on an organic farm in Northern California where I literally woke up to so much. I was 35 years old, and I learned that potatoes grew potatoes by working on a potato farm. And by just learning that, I learned how disconnected I was from the earth, from the elements, from the sky, from all of it. And I started to wake up to so much more, including weather modification, chemtrails, and all of this. And so then I really got on this warpath, bringing awareness to the weather modification, chemtrails. I don't like to call it geoengineering because that's not just what it is. Geoengineering is the dimming of the sun to supposedly save us from global warming. You know, it's a big sham in and of itself. Chemtrails is the word, but that word has been so demonized that it's such a conspiracy to use that word, even though it's the same word. It's just an all-encompassing word that involves basically spraying chemicals from the back of jets. So when I first started to realize that chemtrails were real, and I brought it to my friends and family and peers, and no one knew anything of it, then I really started getting going with it and decided to post the conferences and make the movie. And I've got actually a new movie coming out called Frankenskies 2, Climate Chains. Not climate change, but like shackles, climate change, because of the Hegelian dialectic problem solution
Good one.
scenario that we're being pinned into. I've actually got a GoFundMe as well, gofundme.com/Frankenskies2, if you want to show your support. And if you donate more than $15, you get a Frankenskies DVD. Frankenskies 1, of course. But that one has been a really big hit, and it's a chronological timeline of the weather modification history agenda that evolved into geoengineering and what have you. But it starts off in 1920. Goes all the way through the history, and by the time you get to the 40s and 50s, it's self-evident that the weather can and is controlled. Right after JFK was assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson stepped up and says, control the weather, control the world, and at that point they did and could, and everyone knew it then. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and when I first realized that I had to really get involved in the activism in the chemtrail space, I moved to Arizona to confront this experiment that was unraveling in Tucson, when we actually prevented an experiment from happening in Tucson, Arizona. That was the supposed experiment was to happen to dim the sun temporarily to see which chemicals worked best to launch geoengineering full scale through the media and whatnot. So we went down there, or I did, and I had a conference, a protest, a concert, and we made big waves, not just bringing awareness to geoengineering and chemtrails, but to the experiment, the lack of consent to an experiment in the city of Tucson. And while I was there in Arizona, I learned about 5G. There was this rollout happening right before my eyes, and Arizona is staged to be the first state to go 5G statewide by 2020, they claim. And in Sedona, Arizona, where I was living, which is a beautiful little tourist town of red rock hikes, like a national park, we had 2 cell towers. And the front page said that instead of 2 cell towers, that we were getting 26 new cell towers and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small cells. They call them small cells. And we can talk about that later on in the segment in the show, throughout the entire city. And so I went to City Hall. That was my first time. And I wanted to say, well, what do you mean we're going to put these in the neighborhoods? Have you done research, other studies? You know, what about pregnant women? What about all these things? Because I started doing some research after I saw it in the front page. But little did I know I was really going to get this involved. I mean, it's been a wild ride. So what happened in Sedona is I went to the first meeting, and they said, oh, no, we're not allowing public comment. You can get on this email list. And then I went to the next meeting. And there were people there waiting to comment and talk from the public, and they kept pushing it off for a year.
Oh,
Jimmy, a whole year. And then finally I went after a year of postponements, and I was the only one there who spoke. That's the game that they played. And I said, and they literally didn't understand the words that were coming out of my mouth. I had a friend come and film it, and it was amazing. A couple of people clapped in the end, and then the mayor got all upset and said, this is not a sporting event, no clapping. And I mean, it's pretty classic. But really, they didn't understand my words. And my words were, are you capable of making a decision based on technology that you don't understand, right? Like, you're the mayor, and you're saying, yes, we can have this come in, but are you capable of making this decision? Because should you maybe get a group of scientists and specialists together to confront issues like electrohypersensitivity and pregnant women and all these things, and children and all these different issues, you know, all this stuff, all these things, right? And the response wasn't even like a response to the words that I said. The response was some line out of a book that said that their hands are tied because of state level and that the towers have to go in. And I didn't say don't put up the towers. I said, can we study the impacts, you know, and can we maybe have them not near schools and whatnot? And they weren't even willing to have any sort of conversation with that there. And since then, and then I'll pass the mic to you. Sorry for the long tangent. Since then, I've moved to California. And it's been an amazing journey. I've spoken in Marin County, which Marin County was like the top notch. It was amazing. at the County Board of Supervisors in Marin, California, which is just north of San Francisco, about 70 people spoke, and I was one of them. And it was actually by the seat of my pants. I was randomly in town that day. I mean, it was just serendipitous, synchronized,
Nice.
whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And I went with my camera and thought I was going to film some stuff. And then I lined up, and I was like, I can give 3 minutes just like anybody else. And I was the youngest person there, and we're talking Nobel laureates, brain doctors, Harvard lawyers, authors of best-selling New York Times, you name it, the cream of the crop of the United States, like the best of the best of, we're talking Marin County. You could maybe go to like New York or something, or maybe Chicago, and get some like amazing people, the best authors of the world. But we're talking the best of the best, like these people that are graduated top of their class in Harvard brain doctor school. Like I was just a kid, and comparatively, I'm just an activist compared to these people. And I gave them my heart, and I was 38 years old, and I was by far the youngest person who spoke, right? And there's this generation gap that was self-evident, and people really spoke their words, and it was incredible. A woman fell down after her speech, crying on the floor because she had so many miscarriages and was being impacted by the towers that already existed. And she's like saying, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I am sensitive to this. It hurts for me to even be here right now around all your phone, and she's crying while people are lining up to give their 3 minutes. It was heartbreaking. It was unreal. And Verizon was there explaining why we need it. It was something else. So there's been actual at Larkspur, California, this town, we had the vice mayor pause the meeting, and I've got this on YouTube and on my website, actualactivists.com, under the 5G section. And it's actually even on frankenskiesthemovie.com, and it's titled Best 5G City Hall Meeting Ever, and it's in Larkspur, with a K, California, and the vice mayor stops the meeting, and he says, excuse me, we really have to do something about this. Like, we were lined up to give our 3 minutes, and then they were going to say, oh, yeah, we'll talk about this. We'll meet you back in a year, kind of thing.
Right.
They stop it. They stopped the meeting, and they asked their attorneys, can we just ban this from our community? I was in the neighboring community. But this is the vice mayor speaking. Everyone has to see this. And the vice mayor says, I was in the neighboring community, and this is Larkspur, California, the town in Marin County, California. So I was doing county level and then like town and city levels in this county when I was living in that area. And the vice mayor says that he witnessed what he suspected to be 5G experiments in the neighboring town, because they were doing 5G experiments at that time. And he was in the neighboring town, and a flock of birds dropped dead right in front of him and his wife.
Wow.
And he blamed the 5G, and he says, we can't let this into our community. But there's a whole list of reasons why it shouldn't be allowed. But the EPA and the FDA, even though they've talked and said that we should be studying and researching this radiation, especially even the predecessor EMF radiation and how it's carcinogenic, they've been denied the opportunity to help us. And it's only the FCC now, a spectrum auctioning agency. The FCC is now the sole governing body, and they say that local municipalities, state and county and whatnot, that they're not allowed to consider human health impacts in this rollout. But I'll tell you what, they can, because Mill Valley, California, this city of Verizon execs and all these rich people out of San Francisco, another town in Marin County, this city, it banned 5G from their neighborhoods. So residential areas don't have 5G. So there is hope, and what you have to do, and I'm sorry, is take it to a local level, because the federal level is not looking out for us. So go to your mayor, go to your city council, get it on the agenda and have it discussed. And then it's really easy once it's on the table, because this isn't chemtrails. This isn't talking about the cloud formations and this elitist, like hidden black ops agenda. I mean, this is a cell tower on your street, likely in front of your house, and likely in front of your child's school, a cell tower that emits 10 to 100 times more radiation than current cell towers. It's just, the proof is already there. I can go over lists of research studies and whatnot, but that's that for now. So thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me go off on that.
No, that's great, and we want to hear all of that. And was that Deborah Tavares's county up there? And is she in Marin? Do you know who she is?
I do know who she is,
She's
and I
stopthecrime.net, I believe, is her website, but she's very active in this. If you don't know who she is, you might want to connect with her because she's very much active in all of this, the chemtrails and the 5G and all that. And she ties it into, some government plans that she found. I believe it was on the NASA website of all places, where they describe how they're going to be doing all this kind of stuff. And it's a rather nasty plan that they've got going. And, what we're seeing is that, they just want to roll over the entire populace, put in their agenda, bump off maybe a few million people. Who knows? Make us all constantly sick, even sicker than we are already from all the other poisons that we have going on. It's really gotten absolutely out of hand and crazy what's going on.
And I am familiar with Deborah. We have connected, and now I'm all the way up in Northern California, a few counties north of there currently, and I do believe she is still in Marin. And yes, there is an agenda rolling out, especially in California, and it's related to these fires, or not related to. The agenda is these fires and the control of the weather. So control the weather, control the world. Lyndon B. Johnson was not kidding. So there's this unraveling agenda that I know that you're in Nevada, and I've even seen information from Nevada that they're playing the same game, that they could cut off power because of high winds, because they're worried about fire dangers. I don't know if you caught any of that in Vegas, but for sure we had our power cut off. And what they're playing is, what happened was exactly this, and I'd like to share it with the world, is about a month ago, we were told we're going to lose our power for 5 days because of high winds. Well, there were no fire dangers, and I live right on the ocean, and there wasn't even windy. But then they cut our power, and everybody freaked out, and the gas stations were all packed, hours before, and the food stores were, everything. It was nuts. Everything was just chaos. Then they flipped the power on after 24 hours instead of 5 days. They never said it'll be 1 to 5 days. They said 5 days or longer. They told that to about a million people. Okay, and it's like envision this: you bought a puppy and you don't want your puppy to pee on the rug, right? So you train it. You train it mentally, and it gets used to doing what you want by you have this ulterior agenda. The puppy doesn't know that you're making these plans behind the scene, and you're like, okay, I'm going to give it this and make it do this, and then it's going to do this. But then here's what happened with the humans, us, the millions of people. So then 2 weeks later, and the whole time I was like, we're getting played. This is such a play. Like, I told people it's going to happen again. They're going to do this again. They're playing with us. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, first of all, the winds are engineered. Haven't you seen my movie, first of all? You know what I mean? Secondly, the PG&E, the power company, the monopoly for the state of California, this is Enron, who has a really shady past already. Enron did blackouts already before in a big scam thing, and bankrupted a bunch of people, and then reemerged as PG&E after their big scandal in the 90s. I don't know if you're old enough, you know about it. So here we are. It's 2019, and it's 2 weeks after the first power outage of 1 million people. And then they again say, oh, we're going to cut off the power for 5 days or more. They say the same line. And people freak out, but less. They freak out less. Okay, so there's not as much of a lineup at the gas station, and there's not as much of a freak out kind of thing because of what happened last time. It wasn't as long, and it wasn't as bad as they expected. So what happened was, this time, all of a sudden, some fire got lit in the middle of the night and was spread like crazy by crazy winds. And they evacuated 300,000 people. And then they shut off the power to 2.5 million people, the biggest purposeful power outage in the history of California. All these news headlines, of course. But 300,000 people getting pushed out of their homes because of this crazy fire, because of these crazy engineered winds. That was a lot of fear, and people kind of put two and two together. Well, a lot of people are asleep and not realizing, but other people are saying, wait a second, like, what is going on here with these winds and all of this? People are starting to ask questions, right? So then what happened was we got our power flipped right back on after 24 hours. So people were like, oh, that wasn't too bad. Oh, the power got flipped on. And then all of a sudden the winds died, and all of the 300,000 people got to go back to their homes, and they thought they were going to lose everything in these two cities in Sonoma County. But the cities weren't burned, and they're like, oh, what a relief. And the headlines are like, oh, what a relief. Everyone's also relieved. And who's the hero? Well, the power company, for one, because they shut off the power, and everyone, and like everybody's getting so played. So then what happens a couple of days later? They said, oh, we're going to turn off the power. It's going to be 5 days. The third time in a month. And we're talking millions and millions of people. And I'm like, oh my goodness, are you serious? And guess what? They didn't even turn it off. And guess what? People did not even freak out when they thought it was going to go off, because they've already been entrained like a dog or a monkey or a cat or whatever kind of animal you want to talk about. We're being totally conditioned and trained for some weird agenda. And I think that the weird agenda is something like we're being like told ahead of time so that I don't really get it exactly, but I think we're going to get caught with our pants down, essentially. Like, everyone's going to get so complacent, and then they're going to be like, oh, we're going to turn the power off for 5 days or more because of wind, and then no one's going to prepare, and then they're really going to make it windy, and they're really going to shut off the power, and they'll probably light some fires and be like, oh, well, fires and wind, and we can't turn your power back on. Oh, you're not prepared? Well, your power's off for like a month, and, oh, a cold snap, and, oh, it's winter time. Oh, well, oh, we have this FEMA camp over here if you want to. Oh, what do you mean you weren't prepared? We warned you. Why? But they were conditioned to act a certain way. I'm not predicting the future. I'm just saying this is a potential scenario, and I try to think these things through. But definitely something is going on. I can tell you that because I can smell it. We're all getting played. It's like the winds are engineered, first of all. We know that. And if they're using that as a play to freak everybody out, it's something's happening. And I think it is part of that Agenda 2030 thing where they want to corral people into certain regions and get them out of certain regions. And what they'll eventually say is, oh, that's a fire danger zone. No, you're not allowed to live there anymore. Because they are already starting to do that. And there's this weird thing where they blame themselves and bankrupted themselves, the power company, on these fires, saying that they're down power lines caused the fires. Well, yeah, they did cause the fires purposefully with the smart meters. I mean, there's houses that got pulverized into dust, and people saw the smart meters like bust into flames. Like, these smart meters are equipped to be able to pulse enough electricity to pulverize a home. So they're kind of telling you, hidden in plain sight, like it's right there, but not. They're telling you that they're doing it, but it's so fishy. I don't even know what to say. But regardless of it, we're not getting any rain. They're engineering another drought. And what does that lead to? The fire hazards. And then rolling out 5G, there's so many different research studies, but one that I can talk about, to segue into something else, is that 5G towers, which they want to put a 5G tower every 500 feet. Okay, so that's all throughout neighborhoods, everywhere.
Oh, I know. Hold that thought,
trees.
Matt. We're up against the break, so hold that thought. We're going to jump right back in with that. And then it is crazy. It's definitely a psychological operation, I believe, that's going on, testing here. So we'll talk about that some more on the break. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with Matt Landman. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back for our second segment here with Matt Landman. Also, as you just heard there, if you want to jump in the chat room and ask a question, we'll be happy to answer those or have Matt answer those. Before the break, we were kind of getting into what's required to implement 5G. And Matt, you want to let us know that I believe the towers have to be every few hundred feet or something ridiculous like that, which means they got to cut down a lot of trees and crazy stuff.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Let's start from the beginning, I guess, because it's important, and it's the beginning of the segment, so I can definitely get it out. This will be about, this will just be a few minutes, and we're going to cover a lot, and then I'm happy to answer any questions about it. And what is amazing about this, and please, I don't want to come off as, I never want to come off as like cocky or anything. I'm just trying to convey information the best that I can. So what was amazing about this is I went to the library. It was amazing because I couldn't understand what 5G was. I kept looking it up on the internet, and what I realized is our information source has been just completely tainted. I was doing, at one point, I was doing this daily blog on my website, they're all still there. They're called Daily Truths on my website, actualactivists.com. And on there, every day I would do a daily truth about something, the Federal Reserve, the Starbucks logo, the wheatgrass is healthy, bee pollen. And one day I did Coca-Cola. And I remembered, Coca-Cola's bad. It can melt pennies, battery acid cleaner, all that stuff, all that stuff from high school. It's all common information. And I even remembered, I did a little research study on this when I was in some, philosophy class or something like that in my in grad school, like in 2010. And I remembered the Google search, So I went on Google, and I'm like, Coca-Cola unhealthy. I couldn't find any studies on Coca-Cola unhealthy. All I could find were Coca-Cola is healthy studies funded by Coca-Cola on all the top for the whole first page. And I was just dumbfounded. I tried to tweak my search, like Coca-Cola is unhealthy, Coca-Cola is bad for you, you know what I mean? And I couldn't find articles saying that Coca-Cola was unhealthy. I mean, come on, we all know it. So I read the study funded by Coca-Cola, and the top one says that a double-blind study with human participants or whatever were studied by researchers, scientists, blah, blah, blah. And what they did is they had the people drink water and Coca-Cola, and they studied them. And the humans would urinate more water than the Coca-Cola. Therefore, Coca-Cola is more hydrating than water because of the amount of the fluid retained. Therefore, Coca-Cola is more healthy than water. Ding, 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 ding. Scientifically proven by the. I don't mean to make light of it because it is horrible, but it's the only way to get through to people sometimes. You know what I mean? But It was amazing. So in that light, I realized 5G. I wasn't going to find the information that was really going to bring it home for me. So I went to a library. I was living in Santa Rosa, and I went to the library, and I was like, librarian. I spoke to the librarian. We made some jokes about the old card catalog because I haven't been in a library for quite some time. I've bought books and whatnot. I just don't spend that much time in libraries looking at books. I go there to get on the internet or something. So, just being honest. And then I got all these books in front of me, and it was amazing. Nikola Tesla and radio wave frequencies, and it got really simple really quick. And I realized how we are so deeply indoctrinated. I even just recently learned, and I've spent a lot of my time cooking and eating cilantro and coriander, and I grew cilantro for the first time and went to seed, and all these seeds became coriander. And I had to look it up, and my mind was blown. I did a YouTube video, a long rant that coriander grows cilantro. I never even knew this. I never knew any of these things that should be very simple common knowledge. I never knew that there were different varieties of lemons. I didn't even know about all the different food varieties. There's thousands of varieties of apples and all these things that I've never been told that I should have known way before I got out of elementary school, mind you. Even frequency, stuff about frequency, we're beings of frequency. And these facts are kept from us, which is very important to know. Our heart, our brain, our body, our entire electrical system, down to our cells, we're beings of electricity, beings of frequency. And if we knew certain things about our circadian rhythm, about the Schumann resonance, about what Hertz is and what this invisible spectrum is all around us, then we'd know so much more and be able to be empowered instead of living falsehoods. I really think that when we're embracing and encompassing fake news, falsehoods, lies, that we're not able to really empower truth and live to our fullest because we're living a lie. If we're living a lie of somebody's made up frequency, we're not living a high vibration that we, where we can evolve and be better people, all these other things, etc. So we have the visual spectrum of light that we can see. It's the color spectrum. Red, orange, yellow, blue, Roy G. Biv, green, all the way to violet. Okay, and this is what we can see. And that's just this little sliver of the electromagnetic light spectrum.
Yep.
Okay, it's actually just 1%. And our eyes can only pick up 1% of the spectrum. So there's all this light out there that we can't really see. And it's based on the size of the wave. So when I say size of wave, I mean the distance of wavelength between each peak, let's say. So imagine a wave that's consistent with tops and bottoms, like a wave in the ocean, and each one has a peak. So if you measure from peak to peak, that's the distance in the wave. And so, for instance, you have an AM radio wave. The distance between peak to peak, otherwise known as the wavelength, or the size of the wave, the distance of an AM radio wave is 1,000 feet. And that's really neat and interesting when we start to talk about it. And so let's back up to the color spectrum really quick. So we've got red, orange, yellow, green, all these colors that we can see. And the color that they are is based on their size. So an orange light wave that's measured in nanometers, an orange light wave, if you make it slightly larger, it becomes red. And if you make the red wave slightly larger in wavelength, it becomes infrared and becomes outside of our visual perspective. We can't see infrared, but it's actually all around us. And because it's a larger wave and it's because of its properties, it's actually good for us. It's not harmful. Infrared light has been proven in therapies to help with all sorts of problems, and there's infrared saunas and whatever. Infrared's good. So on the other end of the spectrum is we've got violet and blue light, and then ultraviolet light, like off of the sun. Ultraviolet light is violet. We can't see it, but it's this violet color, and it can burn our skin, and it has vitamin D, and it can burn our eyes, and it's invisible to us. And it's basically like blue violet light that's slightly smaller in wavelength, and it's smaller in size, and because of its small properties that's the way that it does its thing, and it absorbs into our skin because of its size. So back to different sizes of waves and light waves, we've got this thing called the radio wave spectrum, okay? And what radio waves are light waves, just like the light that I just talked about. And they have the same properties. They travel at the same speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second, which, to give you a frame of reference, the speed of sound is 760 miles per hour. So at 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light, ultraviolet travels at that speed, so does infrared, and so does this other light that's called radio waves. You can call it whatever you want, but it's light, and it's the radio wave spectrum. It's also called radio frequency radiation, RFR. And it ranges in size from 1,000 feet all the way down to 1 millimeter in size. And size really is important. Size matters when it comes to radio frequency radiation and how it impacts human beings and plants and insects and all that sort of stuff. So the biggest radio frequency wave, which is a light wave, the largest one is the AM wave. And mind you, everything that we have that's wireless, everything that we carry data on is radio wave frequencies. Wi-Fi, cell phones, 2G, 3G, 4G, all that stuff. Smart meters, baby monitors, radio, like a ham radio, walkie-talkies, baby monitors. I think I just said that. Cordless phones in your home, anything wireless or smart, Internet of Things, the Bluetooth technology. And please get rid of your Bluetooth earphones. I'm sorry, they're really bad for you. It's microwaving your head. You shouldn't be doing that. You're told to even keep the phone a distance from yourself. They even say to keep the iWatch a distance and the Fitbit a distance from your body, even though it's that's not the point. It's on your body, but you're not supposed to keep it on your body. Like mind you, please realize that. So Bluetooth is also bad, and it's all in this radio wave frequencies. So, but we don't see it. It's invisible, and we don't really give it any mind because it's invisible, and we are all pretty much conditioned to this, they wouldn't do anything bad to us type mentality. But here we are, and we're learning about it now, and it's actually really, really simple, and I got this out of a book, and I'm super excited to share it with you because the radio wave spectrum, we should all know about it, shouldn't we? I mean, it's all around us. So I can tune my AM radio, and I can pick up an AM channel. That's because there's AM waves traveling through the walls, through my body, through houses, through everything, trees and everything, and coming all around me. It's all around me, just like light, but it's AM light. So the AM tower on the hillside, way over there on the mountain, like 50 miles away, it's shining light that travels really far and goes through things, and we can pick it up over in the mountains or whatever. And it's 1,000 feet in wavelength. FM radio waves are 10 feet in wavelength. They also can go very far. They can travel great distances. They travel through us. They travel through things. As you get smaller and smaller and smaller, the absolute smallest radio wave on the spectrum is 5G, and it's 1 millimeter size wavelength. And this to give you a reference point, a penny is the width of 1.5 millimeters. So less than a width of the penny is this 5G technology. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what's 4G then, and what's Wi-Fi and all this stuff? About a foot. Like, let's just put it there. It ranges. Wi-Fi even modulates into different sizes and whatnot. And really, the most important aspect is we need to know that 5G, it's so small that it absorbs. That's the biggest little tidbit that you can take home with you, is the size of the wave is so small that it absorbs into what it hits. And that actually is where we have some issues and why it causes problems and why it doesn't make any sense to be a carrier wave for data, because like our Wi-Fi goes through the walls and whatnot. Like, what do you mean it absorbs into everything it hits? It even absorbs into clouds and rain and bugs and stuff. So all of this disinformation propaganda about Elon Musk shut up 20,000 satellites for 5G, that's all fake news propaganda meant to disempower and spread disinfo and all this sort of stuff. Once you learn that the 1 millimeter size wave can only go about 500 feet because it absorbs into everything, and because it's so small, it can only travel not much distance. Even if they crank up the power on these things as hard as they can go, they can only push this little wave carrying a lot of information about 1,000 feet. You know, even the Verizon people were bragging and saying it could go 1,500 feet. That's not that far. You know, that isn't very far compared to, oh, we've got satellites covering it. No. The reason why they want you to think satellites are propagating the wave is because when they put a cell tower out front of your bedroom window and your child gets leukemia, you won't know who to blame. You see what I mean? You'll just throw your hands up in the air and be like, oh, it's probably those satellites. And when you're fighting the 5G small cells on your street corner, and then they tell you, oh, we're putting 20,000 satellites over your head, you're disempowered, and you've lost your empowerment as an activist, and you're just like, oh, what am I going to do? But no, that's fake news, and we need to learn in this age of lies to learn how to discern and to cultivate our discernment and to actually see through what's real and what's not. And when we can really empower ourselves and ride that vibration of truth, we can ride it to other higher frequencies, and more truths become more self-evident and all this sort of stuff. So we've got a 1 millimeter size wave that has to get pushed around by a cell tower every 500 feet, and it absorbs into everything it hits. And also, because of the size of the wave, it confuses our body and makes us think that we're in bright sunlight. So our body's circadian rhythm, our biological clocks get all thrown off, and we can talk about that as well. But I'll go ahead and just pass it on to you. Did I convey that very well?
Yeah, that was great, and that is what I've also heard. I've heard some scientists lecture on this, saying that because that wavelength is so short, it can definitely interfere with brain waves. It can interfere with your vital organs in your body. There's so many different things, and of course, the psychopaths that are pushing all this stuff out, they fully realize all of that. And, that's part of their intent with this technology is to be able to, completely spy on us, because it does transfer so much information so quickly. We do have a question from Skype. Ryan had asked, he said he was told that the newer Wi-Fi routers that we have in our homes already have 5G technology and are being used and have been for the last few years. I've seen a lot of these routers too, and they say 5G, 4G, or 2.4 or whatever. They have all these different numbers on them. Are they actually using a 5D frequency on those, or is that just kind of like tech speak?
Great question, and it reminded me really quick when I was talking about fake news. Also, there's no such thing as 6G or 7G or 10G or 20G. It has nothing to do with progression of cell phone technology. You can't get any smaller than a 1 millimeter wave, right? If you understand the radio wave spectrum and the 1 millimeter wave and how it's in game and all these things, this whole talk of like 6G, that's to disempower and confuse people, to be like, oh, well, why should I fight 5G if 6G and 10G is coming? If you read the 10G articles, they don't even know what they're talking about. They say, oh, it could be future tech. They can't even explain it because it would have nothing to do with the current technology. So if we've ever, and to answer your question, and thank you for the question, if you've heard the old adage about the frog and boiling water, I know almost everyone's heard it by now, but here it is. If you take a frog, you throw it in boiling water, it jumps out. You take a frog, put it in water, and you turn the water up to boil. It'll sit there, and it'll get acclimated, right? And it'll slowly boil and die. So if you took somebody out of the jungle or something, and they'd never been around 5G, and you threw them into some 5G environment, they'd have headaches, they'd have nosebleeds, they'd be like, what the heck is going on? And they'd know, and they'd like fight the towers or something, like, you know what I mean? So they're slowly turning it up. The 5G equipped Wi-Fi routers, I don't think that they're all emitting 5G. I think that they're built as part of this Internet of Things infrastructure, because in order for the 5G to work, you really need everything working in the 5G. You can't just have 5G towers. You have to have 5G phones, and the 5G phones, what they do is they actually act as, it's a totally different technology. We're being completely bamboozled with this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5G. It's not a progression from 3 to 4 to 4 to 5. The 5 is totally different. Your phone becomes a cell tower. Okay, so you're taking the text messages and the video from the neighbor, and you're passing it on. You're sending the information on, not just your information. Got it? So it's like
great.
It's so much more toxic and so much more information being streamed through everything than you can possibly imagine. I fully think that a child conceived, born, and raised in a 5G environment will not be able to reproduce. And that's why that's why the clothing line, I'm making this clothing line, all this stuff, we can talk about that, the silver lining. So for the 5G routers, they're probably experimenting with them. I've had a woman in Wisconsin contact me, and they had come and put a new experimental smart meter on her home, not like her neighbors. She just was randomly picked. And then she started getting crazy migraines, and all the birds started attacking the smart meter. And she's sending me videos of like this bloody smart meter from the birds, and she ended up having her husband call the power company, and they switched it off and said they were running some tests, right? Well,
great.
Right. So if you put 2 and 2 together, I would imagine that, and I've seen that, yes, when you pull up the Wi-Fi and it's like it says 5G, I would imagine that the newer routers the newer routers are equipped with 5G so that they can be part of that Internet of Things, where everything is basically a small cell tower, where everything is emitting the signal and passing on this 1 millimeter size wave. Because essentially everything has to be in sync to push around the wave, because the wave can't go as far as anything. It hits a tennis shoe and it's over, right? It hits your head and it's absorbed into your skin. The 1 millimeter technology is what's used when you go into the body scanner. They blast you with a 1 millimeter size wave and create a perfect map because it absorbs into your skin, and they can see if you've got a razor blade attached to your leg or something like that, right? Well, that they claim that 1 millimeter size wave isn't even impacting the TSA employee that's right there. That's what their claim is. Now, I could go and say that they're probably full of it, right? I mean, actually, I know that they're full of it. That they're getting TSA employees coming down with cancer and stuff like that. But they claim that the 1 millimeter wide size wave can only just absorb into right what it hits. So it literally can't go right there and hit the TSA employee that they're claiming. So they're going to use that as a carrier wave for our data. That means everything has to be involved. Everything. The toaster oven, the street lamp, you name it. And so these like smart cities like Glasgow, Scotland, they're rolling out, these Israeli contractors are coming in, and they're making everything this Internet of Things, because really it won't work until everything's all dialed in. So yeah, it's probably pushing out some experimental stuff. If it says 5G, it could be experimenting, and I'd be unplugging that thing. But long story short, or short story long, sorry, I don't think it's fully on, and it's just part of this infrastructure, just like our smart meters aren't fully on, but when the time comes, they'll be pushing that 5G wave thing around just like everything else.
And once that happens, without any of this testing, there's going to be even more of an outbreak of cancers everywhere. More people are going to constantly be getting sick. And I'll bet you anything, they already have some kind of a story to push people off the trail and say, oh, no, it's not that. It's global warming is causing everybody to be sick, or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, no, they will. They always have something. I mean, I was actually researching and realizing how beneficial it would be now if we had lead paint. And then I learned that the whole lead paint thing was a big scam, that really the gasoline industry had lead in their fuel, and it was making kids sick on street corners, basically, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the lead was building up and making people sick on the roadsides, and so they made the gas unleaded and pointed the blame at the paint because they knew they had to get the lead out of the paint so that they could attack us with this 5G 40 years later or whatever, you know what I mean? So the way that they planned it all out, I'm sure that they'll come out with something. While we're on the track of it being unhealthy, I'd like to talk about...
Hold that thought, Matt. We're just zooming right along here, and we're up against the next break. So hold that thought. We're going to be coming back in just a few minutes, so everybody stick around with us. You're listening to Inside the Matrix with Matt Landman today. We'll be right back.
It's time to go Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix. With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It's great to have you. Once again, we'll remind you that if you want to pop a question in the chat, that's the chat room, that would be great, or give us a phone call. We're talking about all things 5G, radiation, protective clothing, all that good stuff. Matt, do you recall where you were before the break?
Yeah, I was going to definitely, and thank you so much again. I was going to segue into this National Institute of Health research study and then that'll let us talk about blue light, and if you can understand blue light, then you can understand EMF and why that is bad, and what our circadian rhythm is, and what the Schumann's resonance is. Those are all like these key terms. But first, I want to go over my clothing line because I think it's really important for people to grasp what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do and what the future of humanity kind of needs. I'm sorry to say, unfortunately. I mean, hopefully we can create some safe zones where we don't have 5G, and that's up to local activists putting in ordinances sooner rather than later. It's going to be easier to prevent some of this rollout than it is to take it down. So with that being said, I went to Asia because I wanted to figure out how to get this protective clothing in order. And I learned over there, which again, the information is so compartmentalized and censored, I couldn't find the information here. And so I went to Asia and Southeast Asia, and I learned that over there, they protect their pregnant women and their men's private parts with men's underwear and maternity aprons and even baby blankets that are EMF protective. So the electromagnetic fields is a fancy word for radiation. Over there, they just call it radiation. But what it is over time, if you spend a lot of time next to a Wi-Fi router or a cell tower, or even your phone can end up causing problems. Like John McCain, he admittedly had a brain tumor where he held his phone, and he got it removed and got another tumor and died from brain cancer. It's becoming common knowledge, right? Actually, really quick, I want to go over, I can talk about my company in a second. It's Spero, S-P-E-R-O, protectionclothing.com. Spero is a Latin word for hope, and we'll go over all that, but I hope that you can at least visit the website, speroprotectionclothing.com. A lot of resources, and I'll still be adding different options for clothing and merchandise and whatnot. Right now I've got ball caps and cell phone pouches, and soon I'll have winter hats And really, it's a plethora of information to learn about what 5G is, what grounding is, what Schumann's resonance is, and learn about the protective clothing that I've created that's lined with silver. But really quick, I want to talk about this House Bill 522 out of New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is one of the states that said to the FCC, no, we're actually going to ask these questions that you're telling everyone they're not allowed to ask. So the bill, House Bill 522, establishes a commission to study the environmental and health effects of evolving 5G technology.
Oh, wow.
So
Great.
basically, so this is exactly what I've been saying to different, like where I started in Sedona, and then when I went to Marin and all these other places. Danville, I really like my Danville 3 Minutes. It's one of my best. So if you find that one, Danville 5G, Matt Landman, I'm really proud of that one. But either way, what we've got is local levels either speaking out or not. And what I've been saying to these local levels is you have to get some sort of panel of people involved that aren't you, because you're just some guy that owned an ice cream shop and ran for town council. You're not a scientist that gets to dictate whether the future of your community is radiated by enough radiation that everybody dies. I'm sorry, it's just not fair. So New Hampshire did exactly what I thought everyone should do, which is really cool, and they established a commission to study the environmental and health effects of evolving 5G tech. And on this commission are all these representatives of different industries, and especially, but not limited to, they have all these scientists that are qualified, right? Qualified scientists asking questions. And they told the scientists to ask specific questions, and they have a list of the questions. I'm going to read a few of the questions. Why is the insurance industry recognizing wireless radiation as a leading risk and has placed exclusions in their policies covering damages caused by the pathological properties of electromagnetic radiation? Why do cell phone manufacturers have in the legal section within the device saying keep the phone at least 5 millimeters from the body? Why have thousands of peer-reviewed studies, including the recently published U.S. Toxicology Program's 16-year, $30 million study, that are showing a wide range of statistically significant DNA damage, brain and heart tumors, infertility, and so many other ailments, being ignored by the FCC? Why are the FCC-sanctioned guidelines for public exposure to wireless radiation based only on the thermal effects on the temperatures of the skin and do not account for non-thermal, non-ionizing biological effects of wireless radiation?
Yeah.
So I've got one more question. So I've got one more I'm going to read, but we're going to go back to that thermal, non-ionizing radiation, because that's actually really important, because just because you can't feel it doesn't mean it's not happening. And that's what the FCC guidelines basically say. And then lastly, and this one is really something, why are the FCC radio frequency exposure limits set for the United States 100 times higher than countries like Russia, China, Italy, Switzerland, and most of Eastern Europe?
Wow.
Our standards are set so high that people can get totally cancer and leukemia and live right next to cell towers, and it doesn't even matter, because the telecom industry has a revolving door between the private sector and the FCC. The FCC are Verizon execs. It's totally corrupted. And then, so when I talked about non-thermal and non-ionizing radiation, so here's the deal. The international community thought that radiation was bad and knew that radiation was bad and that radiation caused problems like cancer and tumors and all these things. But they didn't really understand radiation until after Chernobyl. So the meltdown of the nuclear power plant in Russia, called Chernobyl, after the meltdown, people thought they could live there because they went and there was not this radiation that they could feel. But over time, built up radiation caused harms, and fish started having 3 eyes and people had 3 heads or whatever, and it was really tragic. And they realized that just because you can't feel it doesn't mean it's not there, meaning non-thermal, not heating, non-ionizing, the word ionizing meaning it strips electrons and ionizes and causes heating. So non-ionizing radiation is like the radiation off of your phone or off of cell towers. If I sit next to a cell tower 24 hours a day, there's going to be problems, but I can't feel it, and the FCC is not even willing to admit it. So there's this National Institute of Health research study, and what they studied was, and this is our National Institute of Health, the NIH, and they studied an irregular pattern of occurrence in utility workers. All of a sudden, they realized that these utility workers were committing way too high levels of suicide. They're killing themselves way too much. And they studied a random sample, and this random sample, 10% committed suicide. And they couldn't understand why, so they studied them and followed them, and they learned. What did they learn? Was these utility workers were in front of these cell towers way too much, and their biological clocks were being thrown off, and they were getting way too depressed because of that. And I'm going to talk about that. And they were getting so depressed they killed themselves. And to the rate of 10% was very statistically high. They're expecting below 0.1%. 0.01% is the national average. So what's happening I don't understand. Let's talk about it. Okay, so humans are beings of rhythm, of frequency. And we really are. We're really sensitive. And when you start to learn about binaural beats and how sensitive even our brain waves are, and you learn about our frequency and who we are as beings, you start to see that our hearts, our brains, everything is just a concert of frequency being emitted. You learn about Masaru Emoto or Royal Raymond Rife. And Rife technology, you could use frequency to really hone in on the frequency that, like how an opera singer can find her pitch and make a wine glass shatter. Royal Raymond Rife could find that frequency for disease or ailments or like cancer and shatter them at a cellular level with frequency. Of course, this technology was squashed by the FDA and all this stuff, but once you start to learn about frequency, you learn a lot. And we are beings of frequency. If you don't think we're beings of rhythm, beings of frequency, how about just don't go to sleep for a week and see how you feel? Like we are. And it's very self-evident. We're actually light beings. I mean, I think we're a lot of our life has to do with the sun and it coming up and down, all of it. And so we become this rhythmical being. Like our DNA is based on this. Our ancestors, they didn't have these computers in front of them, which emit all this blue light, which is actually predatory, which I'll get into. But they were beings of rhythm of the sky clock, they call it. So the Earth has a frequency that it pulses, and it's been called what's called the Schumann resonance. It's based on who the guy who discovered it, Schumann, Schumann. It's on my website, Sparrow Protection Clothing. Please check it out. So on the frequency of the Earth, which is a 7.8 hertz, I believe, 7.86 hertz, we get tuned like a clock. Our biological clock is tuned to the rhythm of the Earth. It makes sense, right? And when we do things like grounding and earthing and get rid of the dirty electricity that's built up in our bodies, we can easily get tuned to the frequency of the Earth. And our bodies, down to our hormonal system, our endocrine system, and our glands in our brain, like our pineal gland, and even our entire skin has optical receivers that know the time of day that it is, the exact time of day. And that's based on the sun going up and down, And
right.
It's pretty up, right? And so our bodies know when to produce cortisol and all these different chemicals like serotonin, melatonin, and things that make us happy. And our bodies need to know the exact time of day because certain chemicals are released at 1:22 a.m. So there's certain things that can throw your biological clock off, which is your circadian rhythm is your clock, right? It's called the circadian rhythm, which is set to the frequency of the Earth, which is our Earth frequency, which makes sure we release these chemicals at certain times of day to make us happy and all these things. And EMF, because of the size of the wave, our bodies are being confused, and we're being told that this is bright light, that it's like sunlight, and it must be noon, like bright noon sunlight. And these utility workers, they're working on these cell towers like at 9 a.m. or 6 p.m., but every time they're around it, their entire endocrine system, their entire body is basically just being fried and being told it's in bright light because we're utilizing radio wave spectrums that are the size of light waves, essentially, like our light waves, like almost identical, so that our bodies are being confused and thinking that we're in light. Even though we can't see the light with our eyes, the rest of our body thinks we're in light. The rest of our body sees it, right? Just not our eyes see it. So our clocks get totally thrown off. So these utility workers were around so much of this radiation that they could never produce serotonin, which is produced at like midnight, because their bodies never thought it was midnight. So there's been a high rate of incidence of teen suicide, and people are talking about blue light now. So blue light is emitted from our monitors, and it's actually pretty predatory once you think about it. If you have the twirly light bulbs, compact fluorescent light bulbs, those aren't really energy efficient. The reason why they claim to be is because they're off about 10,000 times per second. They're flashing on and off. They're pulsing on and off 10,000 times per second. It's totally bad for your neurological system, and it's bad for you, for one. And if the light bulb breaks, it's got mercury in it. It gives you toxic mercury poisoning. It's altogether bad, and it emits blue light, which is predatory and confuses your body and makes you think you're in ultraviolet light and sunlight, and will throw off your circadian rhythm just the same. So get rid of those light bulbs, and also learn about LED. LED is bad. LED street lamps can really throw you off. If there's one outside your bedroom window, you should get blackout curtains. My LED street lamp was making my body think that it was sunrise all night, so I wasn't getting good sleep. Also, get a blue light filter on your computer, get a blue light filter on your tablet or your phone or whatever. That's an easy app. My app is FLUX. Easy, you can just search blue light app, and I'll tell you why. So the Roy G. Biv rainbow spectrum of the light that we see from the sun, that's what our bodies are used to. That's what our ancestors are used to. It's in our DNA that ultraviolet light is like sunlight, and our bodies like it, and it sets our clocks, and we absorb the light and get vitamin D, all of that stuff. Well, right next to ultraviolet on the color spectrum, right next to violet, is blue. And for some reason, all of our devices emit this copious amount of blue light, which is actually pretty predatory. Harvard research study says that children raised looking at blue light, the back of their retinas are actually being burned while they are young because of the size of the wave it's absorbing back there. And we never had this growing up. So they're calling for macular degeneration on a mass scale, and they say that in 30 years these children will be blind if they haven't eliminated their blue light exposure, basically. Like culminated blue light exposure over 30 years, and they'll go completely blind because of the macular degeneration. And that's horrible. But these littler things like depression, which lead to bigger things, we can avoid these just by getting a blue light filter. We can also mitigate our exposure to our Wi-Fi by unplugging our router at night, or getting one of my phone bags and popping your phone in your cell phone bag at night, which completely eliminates the radiation. There's little things that we can do, right? So the blue light, it tells your body that it's like noon, essentially, that you're in bright sunlight. So you're looking at your computer screen or your phone or your tablet, like in your bed or right before you go to sleep, and you're going to bed at like 10 p.m. Well, your body, your entire biological clock, unbeknownst to you, has just been told it's noon. So you go to sleep, and maybe you don't get the most restful sleep, and you don't really understand why. It's because the proper chemicals weren't released during the night, because the whole time your body was like, it's noon, it's 1, it's 2, it's 3, it's 4, it's 5, it's 6, it's 7 p.m., it's 8 p.m., and then you wake up. And like your body's like, wait, it's 8 p.m., and then you're out in the world, and it's actually 7 a.m., and your body's like, wait, what? I'm totally confused. That's not good for your delicate system that releases dopamine precursors, and then dopamine, and then cortisol, and then melatonin, serotonin, all these different chemicals in different parts of the day. So it's no wonder teens are all of a sudden depressed and don't understand why, and their hormones are being totally thrown off and all these things. If it's not EMF, it's something else. It's the ingredients in the vaccines and this and that and all these other things. But I know we can learn and mitigate our exposures one way or another. One thing that I like to tell people about the chemtrail stuff is, yeah, they're spraying it, and now they're admitting that they're spraying it, and there's going to be a lot of aluminum being sprayed, and dementia and Alzheimer's is on the rise and all this stuff. But we can mineralize and get our bodies healthy and alkalize and make sure we aren't eating bad stuff. So one thing that people don't know is that we're basically all magnesium deficient. And this is just one example. For every molecule of sugar that you ingest, it takes 54 molecules of magnesium to process that one molecule of sugar. So a lot of us have eaten sugar and we're deficient in magnesium, and we've never gotten back up to speed on our magnesium, and our body's craving magnesium. And our body's uptaking environmental toxins, hopeful that it's magnesium because it seems like it might be magnesium, based on what our body's guessing, I'll just absorb this from this, But if we were up to speed on our magnesium, for instance, we wouldn't be absorbing those toxins. So we can learn about that, take Epsom salt baths, get a topical magnesium. Magnesium's the central atom in the chlorophyll molecule, so we get our leafy greens and get them fresh and get a lot of them, and we can, figure out our magnesium. That's just one thing. So then our calcium, right? If our bones need calcium, but we haven't given it to it, then there's like radioactive strontium in the air from the chemtrail fallout, and we absorb radioactive strontium in our bones instead, when we could have just been up to speed on our nutrients, on our calcium, on our minerals, right? So just like all those other minerals, there's even plant-based aluminum, plant-based strontium, all these constituents that are supposedly horribly bad because they're heavy metal versions of it. We can get up to speed on all of our minerals and not absorb any of them or not as much at least, from the environment by doing things like getting mineral additives, like when you're like for your water, like from Utah, or there's like in Utah, there's all these different mineral deposits in different companies that you can find, and then you put the drops in your water. It's like mineral additives to the water. What do they call it? Remineralize your water is what they call it. But there's different ways to get the minerals back, and there's different ways to chelate with chlorella and spirulina to get the bad metals out of you, to kind of just take your health back, right? It's all about empowering yourself and taking your health back and realizing you're not a victim. You can unplug your Wi-Fi router. You're not a victim. You can go to your city council and say, well, what about my grandmother? She's got a pacemaker. We can't have a 5G tower on our block. Sorry, ain't happening. You know what I mean? And do what you can with what you have instead of waiting for the hero, for one. And then also, instead of playing the victim in fear, which leads me to my clothing line, which is called Sparrow, S-P-E-R-O, which actually means hope, the opposite of fear, which is what I want us to all try to hope to strive towards, because the they, the boogeyman, that horrible word, they want us living in fear so we can be controlled. It's obvious,
Sure.
And look at your social media, the stuff on my social media that goes viral, it's fear-based. I do things that are hope-based, that are empowering and inspiring, and I see it's censored so heavily, and I can't help but realize that it's because they want the fear pushed out there, and that's it, and that's how they get people into this problem, reaction, solution, every which way, Hegelian dialectic. Well, what's the reaction every time? It's fear, and then they can have any solution right there for you when you're in that space. Once you start to learn about brain waves and, like controlling the minds of the people we just talked about earlier, about the fires and all that, it's really going to be interesting how this all rolls out. So I'm really excited to get my next movie together, Frankenskies 2, because that's really going to expose the agenda with the fires. For one, the chemtrail constituents are aluminum oxide and barium salts. These are actual fire accelerants, like patented fire accelerants. So the forests are being sprayed with fire accelerants, and then these random fires are erupting in the middle of the night. And then instead of engineering rainstorms, which rain can be engineered immediately, like snap, like in 5 minutes time with lasers, we can make it dump rain.
Yeah.
We don't need clouds or anything. The technology is there to seed just atmosphere. And instead, engineered windstorms are being created on top of fires, right, to push around humanity. I'm going to include that in my next film, and that's a very important aspect. But also this push towards a geoengineered normalization to dim our skies because we've been guilt-tripped into the carbon thing and the fear-mongering of the sea levels. Sea levels have not risen. I live at zero sea level. I live on the coast. It hasn't changed 1 millimeter. Nobody can argue with me.
And Obama's just built or just bought a $15 million home on the water, so they're really worried about it, aren't they? Anyway, we're running up against the break once again. The show is flying by. Matt's really sharing a lot of great information with us. You're listening to Inside the Matrix. We're going to take another pause. We'll be back with the last segment in just a little bit. All right, welcome back once again, everybody, to Inside the Matrix with our guest, Matt Landman. This show is just flying by. We got a lot of great information out there, and I will remind everybody once again, feel free to post any questions in the chat or call in if you care to, or just sit back and listen, because Matt is really rolling along here with some great information. So continue on, Mr. Landman.
Yeah, I was hopeful we could go over the propaganda machine, because a lot of people don't fully grasp, for instance, what even Operation Mockingbird, what it is and how we got to where we're at. The way that I see it is that there were the Black Panthers, and the Black Panthers were a threat, and the CIA did not like that. So the CIA infiltrated the Black Panthers. Okay, this is before my time. And they infiltrated them very well and caused a dismantling through different means of, whatever they do. So then more opposition was on the horizon. You name it, chemtrails, GMO, vaccines, whatever you do. And in most all of it, they decided to control the dialogue, control the opposition, control the narrative, control all of it. So every layer of the mainstream that we see is all a controlled means of mind control, all the way back to any mainstream movie that we hold so precious. So when I do activism and I approach people on the street, which is almost every single day with a chemtrail flyer of some sort, screening my movie or passing out my movie or telling them about how to watch my movie on free, frankenskiesthemovie.com, a lot of people say, oh, you mean dim the sun like Mr. Burns in The Simpsons? And then others will say, oh, you mean dim the sun like the 1999 movie The Matrix? And because already they've been programmed to some dystopian reality that's as bad as The Matrix, anything short of that is a joke. And when you bring up, oh, they say they want to dim the sun, they laugh at you, even though it's in their mainstream narrative. Snowpiercer, a 2013 movie, takes place on a train, if you know this one, carrying the last remnants of humanity after an attempt at climate engineering in order to stop global warming has unintentionally created an ice age and killed almost all of humanity. Do you know that one, 2013?
Yeah, I heard about that.
We've also got, I watched 28 Days Later recently on an airplane, which I hardly am on airplanes, but I did watch it, 2003 movie. The entire movie, I'm on the edge of my seat, zombies, totally crazy, and at the very end of this 2003 movie, what is the savior but a chemtrail in the sky? They look up and they see this contrail, chemtrail. By the way, there's no such thing as a contrail. That whole thing is a con. They're either precursor gases or different gases. If you're seeing anything come out of the back of a jet, and I know this is hard to believe because it bumps up against our belief systems, I'm sorry, but if you read the Tropospheric Aerosol Program from the Department of Energy, they disclose that even these things called precursor gases are not contrails, that the high bypass turbofan jet engine, it's like a fan. These new engines, since the mid-'80s, these new engines just produce air like blown with a fan. It's not hot. There's no condensation. That's all the big con. They're mixing chemicals in our sky. So also with blatant chemtrail propaganda, we've got Ants, the movie in 1998, unreal. Also Cars, the movie, 2006, Over the Hedge, 2006, the Smurfs movie, 2011, the Lego movie, 2014, Good Dinosaur, 2015, Angry Birds, 2016. Literally all these movies are chock full of chemtrails, lines in the sky, HARP, rippled out skies, like atmospheric modification out the wazoo. And if you think it's crazy when you watch my film and it gets to modern day, because Frankenskies, the movie, is a chronological timeline, historical documentary. It starts off with military stock footage in the 1920s. There's no fact-checking or disproving it or meta-bunk or anything like that. It's historical stock footage from the military. Just put in order, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right? There's no arguing it. And then once it gets to modern day, it's footage that I've filmed interviewing the politician in Canada and different specialists and scientists and activists and meteorologists and whatnot. But if you really look at it and see the truth, it's self-evident, right? And we've got movies like Geostorm, where the weather is controlled by some crazy AI and it creates massive storms on Earth. The hurricanes are controlled, and the media will never tell you. So Operation Mockingbird is a large-scale program of the United States CIA, in the CIA, right? That began in the 50s. And it started off in the 1950s with propaganda to manipulate the news and the media to tell people how to basically think, wanting to control the minds of the people. Operation Mockingbird in the 1950s never, ever stopped. It got refined and better and twisted, and you've got fake news on top of itself, and they polarize two arguments and control both sides. All right? And that's how we get into situations where we don't know anything about a subject like EMF, radiation. We give it a fancy word, and there's nobody out there telling you, oh, it's harmful, or oh, it's not harmful. We just have it in our lives. Like, literally, like, where's the debate? So let's talk about the history of it, because I've got a little bit that I've done, and I want to tell you about it. The microwave sickness, the term microwave sickness, okay, which comes from radio waves, it was first reported in Germany in 1932, right? All the way back then, we already knew about this. In 1954, the term radio wave sickness was coined as an occupational disease, as radar personnel showed all sorts of symptoms, such as baldness and sterility. Okay. In 1971, the United States Naval Medical Research Institute concluded 2,311 studies. 1971, the U.S. Navy. 2,311 studies they concluded, which they were doing to study EMF radiation and radio waves. And they determined biological effect and clinical manifestation attributed to microwave and radio frequency radiation, which means they determined that clinical manifestation and biological impacts happen from radio waves. So clinical manifestation meaning like something happens and you go into the clinic. You know what I mean? Like something bad.
Right.
So in 1986, Chernobyl nuclear power plant meltdown in 1986. And the global scientific community learned that low-level radiation causes harm. We just talked about that, but I wanted to give you the 1986 date. Then in 1986, this long-going study called Project Pandora, under Eldon Bird, he said we can alter the behavior of tissues, cells, and organs and whole organisms with 6 times fetus mortality in lab animals with EMF radiation. What happened with this Project Pandora, which started off in like the 50s, is in Russia, we had diplomats that were being targeted with RF radiation technology like weaponry, radio frequency weaponry from the USSR. We learned that our people were being targeted, and instead of defending them or telling them, we just studied them, right? And then after 40 years, we concluded that it's really bad, and we gave them some big fat checks. But we learned that radio waves, we learned all about how harmful they are and what they can do and the impacts they have. And based on their size, especially like the micro-sized waves, actually microwave things. In 1990, the EPA drafted a report recommending EMF be classified as a possible carcinogen. They cited 33 conclusive international studies linking EMF to brain tumors, leukemia, and other forms of cancer. This was in 1990. The EPA wanted to classify the EMF as a carcinogen. And then in 1993, the FDA came out with biologists that concluded that there's an EMF link to radiation, right? And then in 1996, the FCC releases a statement that forbid EPA and FDA from researching EMF. Proclaims that they're now the sole authority on 1996 on EMF safety. So in 1996, the entire industry was hijacked, and the FDA and the EPA were told, "No, thank you. We don't care what you think." Even though they had the studies and they wanted to put into account, like they wanted to make laws, right? And the FCC said, "No, we're in charge." And then in 1996, the U.S. Telecom Act was pushed through by the Clinton administration. in 96. And that's what the FCC goes off of. It's just this one act that was pushed through that basically gave the FCC a bunch of power and said that the telecom agencies don't have to think about human health impacts. They just need to push innovation. Because in 96, they were worried about, they claimed that they were worried about China, and they wanted to innovate faster than them. And in 1996, nobody saw technology taking off like it did. You know,
Right.
It really did. Think about what 1996 was. We didn't have wireless, internet, or any of this stuff. So now we're going back to this one U.S. Telecommunications Act, and that's what the federal level is basing everything off of. And that's why New Hampshire is saying things like, no, we're going to not just go off of a 1996 U.S. Telecommunications Act. We're going to actually think for ourselves and represent our people because
What a
we owe it to our
concept.
constituents. Yeah, I mean, really, and you know what the FCC said? They said, well, you know what you can talk about is aesthetics, like how it looks. So then people are allowed to disguise them as cacti, or palm trees, and that's why we have all these fancy like church steeples and stuff, because they're allowing us, listen to this, they're allowing us to consider aesthetics. Meaning they're allowing us to hide them from ourselves, but they're not allowing us to discuss human health or environmental impacts. That, to me, sounds like a totalitarian regime or something. Like, we should be able to consider our health. I'm sorry, like literally somebody say something. So that's why I've devoted so much commitment to this, because I want pregnant women to be safe. I want future children to be safe, and I want them to be able to be born and raised into an environment and grow up into an environment where they can procreate and have children again, because I really see this as a predatory agenda. Because when you learn about the 1 millimeter size wave, it really impacts really small things like fetus, okay, and sperm. And when a child is being developed in a womb and they're 1 millimeter in size, and you've got a 1 millimeter size wave bombarding them everywhere, like light surrounding them that absorbs into everything, including their mom and the fetus, it's going to cause developmental harm. And when they're a baby and they've got 1 millimeter size tiny little eggs growing in their, developing in their body, those eggs are going to be infertile, right? It's a depopulation agenda. It's designed that way, okay? You wouldn't have a carrier wave that absorbs into everything, including the people, and then not talk about it, not even talk about protection, and then tell everyone they can't talk about human health impacts, and then just roll it out if it wasn't predatory. This doesn't make any sense. So, Spero, S-P-E-R-O, I've got maternity aprons that are the silver material. Everything is lined with silver. The catchphrase is, wherever there is hope, there's always a silver lining. And Latin for hope is Spero, my brand. And I'm lining everything with silver. The hats, the cell phone pouches, the maternity aprons, the upcoming T-shirts and men's underwear and baby blankets and hooded baby onesies, all lined with silver. This silver material that I can actually only get it out of China, and now I'm facing this crazy Trump-Chinese trade war, and it's just unreal. But it's this technology where they take micro-sized filaments of nylon, dip them in silver, and then make a silver fabric that deflects radiation. Only silver, nickel, copper, and steel work as an armor from EMF radiation. And silver's one of the best ones right now. It's the top market in Israel, Japan, Korea, Germany, China. And I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just bringing truth to people that have not been told it yet, basically. So please check out the website and check out the brand. And maybe not yet, maybe later, if they bring a cell tower into your neighborhood and you can't fight it, you'll consider protecting yourself and your children with this protective clothing line or another brand, or start a clothing line yourself, please. Let's protect the children. Thank you.
Yes, I like that. When you talked about going back and looking at origins of Project Mockingbird,
I personally, I go back to the moon landing and the introduction of the black and white television set. It seemed pretty fishy that all of a sudden people had this TV set in their bedroom, and I mean, of course you're going to trust it. It's like the biggest thing since fire, and all of a sudden we're walking on the moon. And then you realize, 50 years later that was predatory and totally fabricated, and it was tinfoil, and duct tape, right? And literally none of it adds up. So it was this weird push towards, now I see Elon Musk shooting a convertible into space, and that's just like another test on our discernment. I like this quote. You can either there's this quote that I like to sound off every opportunity I get. You can either take truth as the authority, or you can take authority as the truth, right? You can think for yourself, or you can you can honor the truth of integrity and really, resonate with that cultivated intuition in your belly, in your gut, in your heart, and really know, right? And when you see some BS like a moon landing like that doesn't make any sense, and then even now they say that they can't do it again, and all this, like what sense is that? Like, where's your discernment? Maybe we can think for ourselves instead of this weird nostalgic programming that gets us all hooked on this space race that leads us where? Like, I try to discern and really, extrapolate and hypothesize where they're going with this. And then I see Elon Musk, right? Who I've actually, during my activism career, I've really started to look people in their eyes and judge the crap out of people. Like recently, Mark Zuckerberg has this real darkness in his eyes, and he didn't have that before. I wouldn't hand him a chemtrail flyer, that's for sure. But the previous Zuckerberg, he had this life in his eyes, you know what I mean? So Elon Musk, right? He shoots a convertible into space and tells us that, he's trying to send it to Mars. And don't worry, it doesn't look too fake. It's so fake that it must be real. Believe it or not, that convertible never got shot into space. It's completely fabricated. And he was even asked, what about the paint job? Wouldn't it melt in space? What about the mannequin? Wouldn't,
the tires?
Test? He's like, no, we just shot it into space, right? We just shot it up there. So again, we're being kind of tested and tricked into either believing the truth or believing what we're told. And where is this all going? Well, the Elon Musk thing, he now owns Neuralink, this company, Neura, Neuralink, where it's this total transhuman agenda rolling out right before our eyes. And it has this USB port that people put in their head. Are you kidding me? Seriously, yeah. I'm not even joking. And people are lining up, and they're all excited because Elon Musk is saying, well, we're going to go to Mars. Didn't you see I shot a convertible into space? Wasn't that cool? And all of a sudden, these people who, in their generation, in this generation of people, they were bamboozled into believing this moon landing, and then they had this nostalgia programming for space and NASA, and whatever NASA says is real and amazing and too cool. But NASA has a budget of $52 million a day. They have a charged aerosol release experiment chemtrail program, for one, which is public. It's called the CARE program, C-A-R-E, Charged Aerosol Release Experiment. And they have fleets of planes and drones, and they spray barium, aluminum, strontium. They spray all these different chemicals in the sky, making, quote, noctilucent chemical clouds to experiment with the weather, and they do it publicly. And they have a budget of $52 million a day. The Bush administration shot the Hubble telescope into space. If you really look at that thing, it's tinfoil, right? And then they send us CGI photos and tell us, oh, yeah, don't worry, we're going to go up there one day. You'll love it. It'll hopefully be in your generation. And then Elon Musk comes along and says, we're going to go to Mars. Just be part of the club. We're going to put chips in your head. And it's all too reminiscent of Total Recall, the movie. So we were talking about all of this programming and how easily manipulated we are and conditioned we are. And I talked about Snowpiercer. Just to reiterate, Snowpiercer is a 2013 movie where an attempt at climate engineering, and at the very first 5 minutes of the movie, the climate engineering is chemtrails sprayed from planes, just like geoengineering, just like what we see in our skies if we're awake, or what they propose they're going to do in the mainstream media. And this 2013 movie says that they climate engineered in order to stop global warming, and they unintentionally created an ice age and killed most of humanity. Duh. They blocked up the sun, and everybody died. Well, that's exactly what is looking like is going on here right now. So then also you've got this conditioning mechanism, the Matrix. Oh, dim the sun. Oh, it's not going to be like the Matrix. Are you crazy? 1990, everybody saw Total Recall. There was a alien with 3 breasts. Like, everyone remembers it a little bit. I had to re-rent it the other day and watch it. Oh, mind you, Children of Men, 2006. All of a sudden, nobody can have kids. Oh, look at that programming. All of a sudden, nobody can have kids, and there's only one woman on Earth that can have kids. I bet you she wasn't exposed to 5G. Children of Men, 2006. Think about the programming. Think about how susceptible we are to the literal mind manipulation, suggestibility programming. If you go back to Bernays and Freud and all of it, we are so deeply programmed. So Total Recall, 1990 film. Total Recall, Schwarzenegger doesn't even go to Mars. He gets a memory implanted in his brain.
Exactly.
Right? So we've got this group of people that are eating out of Elon Musk's hand because he shot a convertible into space but said it was fake, but said it must be real because it looks so fake, and people are like, oh, I believe anything you say now because you made Tesla cars, and I don't know what, he's cool, right? The guy's cool. Oh, he smoked a joint with Joe Rogan. That's right. He smoked a joint with Joe Rogan. Therefore, I will put a chip in my head. So where do I put my USB port? Oh, right there in my head. Great. Thank you, Elon Musk. And but we're going to really go to Mars. Okay, that's perfect. Thanks, Elon Musk. But then he has the ability to implant a Mars trip in your head. I mean, come on. Let's get with the programming, literally. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting, though, isn't it?
It's absolutely nuts, and so much of this stuff just slides right over people's heads, and they just don't stop to think about how absurd a lot of this stuff is. And and how about the idea of, is rocket technology the state of the art? It's been around for 150 years, and that's what we got to do. Yeah, we got to we got to use rockets. We don't know anything about any other kind of propulsion systems like they had in the 30s, maybe, that were flying around with the Germans. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy that the stuff that passes for, supposedly the truth. And it's all programming, and it relates back to what when you mentioned Edward Bernays. I mean, he wrote the book literally on how to convince people with propaganda, and it's worked very well. Well, Matt, we're at the end of the show. It's flown by. Thank you so much for being here. Give us your websites once again real quick.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on. It's nice to be able to go on tangents, and I'm just trying to get the message out. Don't mind me. I really appreciate everyone listening. My websites, I have Actual Activists, plural, actualactivists.com. And that's a hub for all your information. There's a 5G tab there, chemtrails, vaccines, a plethora of information. I guarantee if you scroll on there, you'll find a lot of stuff. FrankenSkiesTheMovie.com, also SparrowProtectionClothing.com, SPERO. And then please support my GoFundMe.com/FrankenSkies2 so that I can get this movie out as soon as possible.
All right. Thanks, Matt. We're out of time. Goodbye, everybody. See you next week.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative, divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.